What's going on, fellas? This is Mike D with Black Fathers Now. And dig this. I have a really cool conversation today with a brother who brings a lot of insight, a lot of wisdom, and he brings things from a perspective that a lot of us need to hear it. Sometimes we come with opinions, but we got a brother that's going to bring some fact and some actual strategies for us to think about in regards to life and how we operate in the realm of fatherhood, relationships, but then we jump into the legal realm. So we're going to have a cool conversation. And that conversation is with my man, Darryl Daniels. Now, Darryl is not yet a father, but he is a brother who practices law, specifically family law in the DC area. He's originally from Detroit, Michigan, a graduate of Michigan State University undergrad and law school at Howard U. He's passionate about evening the playing field for men in the field of divorce, custody, and child support matters. This is a conversation that we definitely need to hear. So, fellas, in the Black Fathers Now family, welcome my man, Darryl Daniels. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, Mike. How you guys doing?
Man, we can't complain about nothing, brother. Can't complain about nothing. First and foremost, whenever I have a brother on, the first thing I like to do is to let them give shout outs to whoever they need to give a shout out to, the support team, because my whole thing is we got to keep our priorities in check. Our titles and all that stuff are cool, but our support system is the reason behind our titles and things that we accomplish. So go ahead and give your support system a shout out, brother.
Thank you. First and foremost, I do want to say thank you for having me on, and thank you anyone who's out there listening. Mike Dorsey's doing a great job with this podcast. I hope you all continue to listen and continue to reach out to him for insight. As far as shout outs go, first and foremost, I always want to thank God.
Absolutely.
I always want to thank my parents. I won't say their names, but my parents have been extremely influential in my life. Anybody from my immediate community in Detroit, Michigan, as well as my Howard Law community. I've also lived and worked in Philadelphia as well. Met a lot of great people in Philadelphia. And all those in and around the DC metro area that know me, worked with me, anybody that I have ever asked any questions for, I'm truly thankful, and I give my complete gratitude to you guys.
That's what's up, man. That's awesome. It's funny though. I'm gonna have to call you out a little bit. All right, now we're recording this now, and it's going to get released a lot later. But as we record this, we're about to embark on the Final Four. And I mentioned that you went to Michigan State undergrad, and you didn't say nothing about Michigan State. I don't know if I should have said that, because you might have some doggone Spartans that are ready to come for you, huh?
Well, you know what? That may have been just an oversight. But I bleed green, Spartan dogs to the core.
Okay.
I love my school. I wish them nothing but the best. And if anybody who follows sports now, you look at the teams that are in it right now, I think we 100% chance to win. We beat Duke, and it is a wrap from there. I expect the green and white to bring it home back to East Lansing without any question in my mind. That's what's going to happen next weekend.
Okay. Now it's funny because we'll know, because this is getting released, many weeks after the national championship. So we'll know.
Well, I'm telling you, you heard it here now from me. Michigan State, I'm going to take them over Virginia. I think we're going to win by 7-8 points.
Oh, okay. And look, and we're recording this on April the 2nd. So we're recording this April the 2nd. It's getting released later. You're listening to this later, but we are recording this on April the 2nd. So, my man, if he's correct, he practices law, but he might have a career over in Vegas somewhere working in a casino if he's got all this stuff lined up. You can double in moonlight, right?
I will warn you guys, all the listeners out there, my bracket is so shot I wouldn't take my advice. I wouldn't put too much stock in my advice, but Michigan State will win.
Oh, okay. All right. Look, I'm making a note of that. On April the 2nd, Darryl Daniels said Michigan State will win it all. We gonna see.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, cool, man. And so let's kind of jump into your story here, man. Take us back. You mentioned you're originally from Detroit. So talk to us about, growing up in Detroit. What was your home life like? And, what were some of your inspirations? And, ultimately, I'd love to get to the point of really understanding what were your inspirations that really helped you to choose to jump into the realm of becoming a lawyer, as a career?
Okay. So growing up in Detroit was great. I mean, despite what listeners may or may not know about the city of Detroit, Detroit is a great place. It's a great place to live, great place to grow up. I grew up in a two-parent household. I had my father as well as my mother. We had my brother. I'm the oldest child. So I had one other brother. I now have a younger sister who my mom adopted pretty much when she had an empty nest.
Mm-hmm.
So the four of us growing up initially in the house was great. We grew up in a pretty middle-class neighborhood. It's crime everywhere, but our neighborhood was pretty close-knit, and I knew everybody who, down the block, up the street, things of that nature. For me, my mom in particular, she didn't always trust the public school system in our immediate area. And as far as the logistical thing, we always went to school downtown Detroit. We always went to school downtown Detroit, more so to not be in the element of now it's after school and I'm out getting into trouble and things of that nature, as well as just being closer to her job for drop off and pick up. So I did Catholic school, elementary, I did charter in middle school, and I did a public high school, which is the best public high school in Detroit. Another shout out to Cass Tech in Detroit.
I've heard of Cass Tech. Somebody famous. Let me see. Who was it that went to Cass Tech? Somebody made it famous recently. Who's made it famous recently?
If you're speaking maybe in the entertainment industry, Big Sean is a Cass Tech.
Maybe it's Big Sean. Okay.
He's a year older than me, so I went to high school with him. So shout out to all the people from Cass Tech. Graduated there in 2007, and from there, I always knew I take that back. It didn't matter what I knew. I didn't have a choice in regards to whether or not I went to college or not. It was it was go to college or get out. So I went to Michigan State originally, and I always tell people this in terms of my college admission story. It was important to me to do what I call half and half.
Okay.
So I wanted to experience a PWI. For those of you who don't know, PWI, predominantly white institutions. Those are normally your larger public universities.
Mm-hmm.
So I always wanted to experience that as well as the HBCU. And It didn't really matter which order it came in, as long as I got to experience both. And I tell people this story millions of times, and I'll give a short version now. My mom kind of sabotaged me in my college admission process. And I was originally planning on going to Morehouse. But I filled out the application, and she works in a position where she can send things freely. So I asked her to send off this application now. She tells me, like, I sent it off. And, months later, I called more. So I'm like, hey, what's going on? Am I on a wait list, or how's that working? And like, oh, well, we never received applications from you. And I talked to my mom about it. She was like, well, it all worked out. You got into Michigan State. So she never admits to doing what she did. But, in hindsight, years later, she told me, I just wasn't comfortable with my firstborn going so far. We're from Detroit. Going all the way to Atlanta for her would have been, ridiculous. So
wow.
At the end of the day, it did all work out. I went to Michigan State. I love my time in Michigan State. Met a lot of new people. While it is a predominantly white institution, the Black community there was kind of large, and it was kind of close-knit. Most of us did come from Detroit, obviously, as the big city in that state. But I had a great time. And
well, let me tell you, what's interesting there is funny. You said that you initially wanted to go to Morehouse, right? Mm-hmm. I'm originally from Augusta, Georgia, which Augusta is 2 hours east of Atlanta. And growing up in Augusta on Georgia Public Television, when I was in high school, I'm a few years older than you. I finished high school in 98. But in the mid 90s, there was a special on Georgia Public Television. I think it was called like The Making of the Morehouse Man, where it was like this mystique, and it really showed just the camaraderie and the process or their initiation of becoming a Morehouse man. And after watching that documentary or watching that film on PBS, I wanted to go to Morehouse. And so literally that was the thing. So if you had asked me from the 10th grade on, Mike, where are you going? Well, I'm going to Morehouse. And what was interesting about that was, I applied. I actually got into Morehouse. But the problem was I wasn't a presidential scholar. And so Morehouse wasn't throwing a brother no money. And so I wanted to go to Morehouse, but in reality, Morehouse didn't necessarily want me to come because they weren't throwing no money. So I, in essence, had a PWI experience as well. I went to Georgia Tech. And so I was still in Atlanta, but I didn't make it to Morehouse. So, shout out. We kind of got a similar, it's not a similar story, but we both had similar intentions coming out of high school.
Right. And, I went to a high school that I would say was 98% Black.
Okay.
So having those older people who come home on breaks and things of that nature, and I also was on the football team as well. So like having those people around me who've experienced the HBCU community, whether it was, a lot of our graduates from our high school, they go to Howard, they go to one of the big three down in Atlanta, they go to Hampton and things like that. So having those people around to tell me about their experiences there was helpful as well, in like kind of guiding me and guiding those intentions initially.
You had that. It's that village. I mean, it was interesting. Like you mentioned, you grew up in a neighborhood that was kind of like a village. You had a tight knit community, but then even in school, high school, when you went to Cass Tech, it sounds like you kind of had that village experience as well with some of the, some of your older students or the former students that have gone off to college. It's like that's this fabric here that's pretty interesting, and it's interesting because that's actually the tagline of the podcast. Black Fathers Now, the tagline is bringing the village to the brothers, because a lot of us don't inadvertently live in villages anymore, but because of technology, we have the means to bring that village to you. So there's really no excuse to not build those connections, to learn from, to gain insight from, and to, maybe to, exercise some wisdom and maybe avoid some of the missteps that they, encountered along the way. So that's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. And so, okay, so you ended up going to Michigan State undergrad, and but what was the impetus for you to become a lawyer? Like, was that something that you always wanted to be growing up, or what was the inspiration there?
Well, to be quite honest, I always tell people if money was never an issue in this world, my number one goal, my number one passion would have been to be a football coach.
Really?
But, oh yeah, I love football. It's like one of the only things that, I continue to be passionate about to this day. I played football from the time I was 6 to 18, 19 years old. So like, and that's a way that my parents used to keep me and my brother out of trouble. We were football in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring.
Wow.
So we've never had an opportunity to actually run the streets and do negative things. Maybe not until, high school years, when my father allowed me to kind of like, okay, if you want to stop playing baseball, you can stop playing baseball, focus on football. I'm only 6'2", like, I'm a big guy. I wasn't going to play basketball. So that's what was out. But so becoming a lawyer, it was kind of a situation like this. I thought about it one day, as in, there are two professions in our society. And, this may not apply now, because this was 18-year-old Darryl thinking this.
Okay.
There are two professions in our American society where no one can question you or your abilities to do anything else. And when I say that, I mean it's being a doctor or a lawyer. It's not too many things above those professions. And when I say that, I mean specifically, if you become a doctor, the only thing that you can't do is probably be a lawyer. You can pretty much do anything under that. And if you become a lawyer, the only thing that you probably can't do is become a doctor. Obviously, the true hardened mind may want to take on that many years of schooling, but when you get to those two levels, I just feel like there's not too many things under that you cannot do or you won't be qualified to do. Obviously, there are different opinions, and like I said, this was 18-year-old Darryl thinking, and now that I'm going to be 30 this year, understanding different professions and how people got to the places they are, I definitely have changed the way I look at things now. But back then, I'd always wanted to be a lawyer because I just didn't really think about I could ever make a good doctor. So I always wanted to be a lawyer. And that,
it's interesting you say that. So it sounds like it's like an intellectual decision, right? So the way that you talk about it from a hierarchical perspective, it's kind of like the level of schooling or the level of education or the level of intellect, right? And so what about that? Like, what is from an intellectual perspective, why do you, on a personal level, do you feel like, you have to intellectually be intrigued or intellectually be on a certain level to feel like you've accomplished something? Like, what about you has led to that? Because you mentioned it's like, you play football, and if money wasn't an issue, you'd have coached football. But there's this thing, and it sounds like you're looking at it from an intellectual perspective. What is that? Is it like that you were trying to rid yourself of the jock moniker, or was it that, I've always been just a, high achieving academic scholar, so to speak. I always want to intellectually challenge myself. Like, dive into that a little bit. It's always interesting to me, like, to hear people's thought process in regards to decisions.
Well, I'll be honest with you. It's not even a complicated thing. It was very much so simplistic.
Okay.
When I figured that, I wasn't going to go to the NFL or nothing like that, I always wanted to stay in sports in some capacity. So I wanted to be a sports agent. And when I got to researching exactly what sports agents are and what their background is, most of them are attorneys.
Absolutely.
Now, they don't practice law, but most of them are attorneys. And I said, well, if I want to get to that level, and if anybody knows anything about like coaching major college football, there's a lot of time that has to be put in on the lower levels.
Yes.
Time is spent being what they call a graduate assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And you aren't exactly compensated for that. Now, I came from a good family, but I didn't come from a family that can carry me into my 20s while I work for free.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, in a sense, also, I just wanted to work around athletes. So, but I also wanted to not let my education go in vain. So, I wanted to become a sports agent. And that's actually what I originally intended to go to law school to do. It just so happened that once I got there, I became intrigued by other things. And it kind of led me down into the path I'm at now.
That's interesting. So it was intellectual, but then, being 100 about it, it was also financial. You're just like, you know what? I want to make bread and live a certain lifestyle. So financially, I need to be there. But then I also intellectually want to stimulate and challenge myself. And so
Exactly.
that kind of led.
One quick point on that, when you talk about financially too, it was something that like a OG of mine kind of told me along the way. I can't exactly remember who, but I know it was an older guy. One principle that I was brought up on was there's always going to be a premium on people who can do things that others can't do.
Ooh, that's deep.
And that you don't necessarily have to tap into the intellectual side of things all the time, because there's always going to be a premium for professions that other people just cannot do. Now, whether there's a barrier in terms of like having a legal license or whatever, you when you think about it, there are not too many people who can fix their cars. Mm-hmm. So now you got car mechanics. That's what they specialize in. They can kind of charge whatever they want. You don't necessarily know if they're cheating or not. I have to say to the people who are mechanics are doing that or unsavory characters. It's just the simple fact that they can always set the market, and they can set a premium because they know that you need them. They don't need you. Like
You hit something. Well, first off, I caught the fact that you gave the legal disclaimer. That was kind of funny. Like when you're talking to a lawyer, I have to first say that all auto mechanics are not. It's funny. Like you automatically defaulted into the legal disclaimer. That was really dope. But then to your point, it's kind of building on that. It's like a yes and. There's a concept that I've always thought about, and it's the scenario that unskilled labor is rarely overpaid, highly skilled is rarely underpaid. And this is consistently. Now you hit rough patches and people go through, layoffs and things like that. But in reality, that literally kind of jives with what you're saying, in the sense that if you're highly skilled, highly valued, rarely from a consistent perspective are you going to be undercompensated over the long term, because not a lot of people can do what you can do. Is the simple law of supply and demand. You know what I'm saying? It's like limited supply. So therefore the demand is extremely high. And when the demand is extremely high, that's when the prices go up. Economics, my degree's in economics, but you start understanding that, at its root basis.
Right. And another thing that, we always say, like just, my particular network, you pay the cost to be the boss type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're paying a certain premium for me because of what I've invested in myself. So
Mm.
I've invested so many years and so many thousands of dollars in my education and my years training to do this thing for you. That's what you're paying for. A lot of times people come into the legal community and they say, well, you know, he didn't really do anything, or why do I have to pay such a high retainer? You're paying for all, like, because you may come to me and it may take me actually 1 hour to figure out your problem, or I may 9 times out of 10 I can figure it out in the first 10 minutes. But you're not paying me for those 10 minutes or that hour. You're paying me for the years of experience that I'm gonna bring and the actual work product that I'm going to produce for you in
Mm.
that amount of time. So it's
That's
one of those
deep.
things where it's like you paid the cost to be the boss type of thing.
That's deep. It's interesting. You said, you're not necessarily paying me for what I'm doing. You're paying me for the investment that I made in myself.
Right. In a sense, like,
Mhm.
technically you're going to pay for that work product. But initially, when you meet me, if you have any questions about what the price may be, that's the explanation.
Mm.
My reputation, the quality of work that I'll do for you, that's what you're getting. That's what you're paying a high premium for. So that now when that work product comes through, and, you know, and family law is a little different because there's not a lot of winning and losing per se. But
Mhm.
when you get to that point, you're paying for the reputation. You're paying for that attorney's experience. You're paying for all the resources that he may or may not have. He or she may not have. I mean, not exclude women.
There you go with a legal disclaimer. I love it, man. But yeah, but that's fascinating. But that's also a mindset that brothers need to adopt as they go in. It's like when you think about, and it's interesting. You make me think about something there. It's like when you think about something like art, right?
Mm-hmm.
To the general eye, I might look at two pieces of art, right? And one piece and another piece, they look almost identical to me. I'm like, okay, there's nothing too much that distinguishes either one of them. But the one on the right, I can get for $10 at the little art fair down the street. The one on the left is like $10 million because it was done by some famous artist, and it's in high demand, and everybody wants this particular artist's work in their house. And so, to your point, to the naked eye, it looks the same, but there's a whole lot more behind it that really determines the value prop there.
Exactly. Exactly. And with when it comes to the legal profession, it really it's a lot of factors that goes into setting prices, and we can kind of go over that like for hours on end. But at the same time, all the message that I really want to convey to people is that you have to be respectful of people's time, and time is always going to equal money.
Mm,
So if you figure that you can't afford this one, that's not to say that the next payment isn't going to be worthwhile. It just may not. You may not get the same quality or the same investment or return type of thing. Return on
mm,
investment. I'm sorry, from that first one. So that's something that's very intricate and kind of specific to different markets. Like in DC, you know, what I may charge here may be exponentially higher than what I may charge in my hometown, just because of the cost of living and what
mm-hmm.
everything that I need to do to provide for myself, as well as the time that I'm spending in your case. But that's like a very intricate conversation that like you would definitely need to have with any time you walk into a legal office.
That's and I mean, and that's something I think we're gonna jump into in a few minutes, but that's it's like real estate, right? I mean, a 2 bedroom apartment in DC is gonna cost different than a 2 bedroom apartment in Jackson, Mississippi, or in East Lansing,
Oh,
Michigan, or in the Silicon Valley. You know what I'm saying? It's
oh
gonna
yeah.
be the same exact thing, copied and pasted, but in different locations is gonna cost different. And you mentioned something too, though, and it made me think about the concept of, in essence, you get what you pay for. And from the outside looking in, when you see various legal cases, and when people sometimes are have like various just court appointed representation versus that person who has millions of dollars to pay for the highest dollar Johnny Cochran type lawyer or legal team. And the reality is, it seems like, and maybe it doesn't seem like, it's probably studies and numbers to back it up, that money does typically buy better outcomes.
Now, this is one thing that I will say, because this comes up a lot. And I do think that sometimes there's a misconception, right?
Okay.
So in a sense, that's true, because if you have, like, for instance, you get a $1 million client, and that person is paying millions of dollars towards their legal defense. The work product may ultimately be the same that you would get from a court-appointed attorney. The major difference is the resources that the person would have. Because let's just say, for instance, this is just a very quick example that we'll do in terms of a divorce, since we're talking about family law, right? So if you have a lot of money now, because your retainer is higher and you've given me the resources to kind of do certain things for you, now I have the resources to hire an investigator on your behalf. I have the resources to bring in accountants so that we can do appraisals of property and things of that nature, as opposed to you having someone who doesn't necessarily cost as much, but they may not also have those resources at their disposal. They may not have those things in their network in order to really move the case along. Or, obviously I won't say that they aren't seeking to get a favorable outcome at the time, but these things don't come cheap. Now, when it comes to the criminal context, I always say this: you get a court-appointed attorney, they're just as qualified as the person you're going to pay for. The only difference is you're paying. That's your only difference. The only difference is that now you're paying, and a lot of times people, because I work in criminal law as well, and people will say, well, I got a court-appointed attorney, or I have a public defender. But one thing you don't realize, that public defender, they're a specialist. They're in that courtroom every single day. So if it's anybody who knows how to get you out of something and get you out of it quicker, it may be that public defender. Now, where the person you're paying, they may try to smooth their way out of it. They may try to buy their way out of stuff and try to use their reputation as a stranglehold on the prosecution. But that public defender, that is their only job. Everybody on their list that day gets the same rigor in terms of advocacy for them. So, like, I know that it gets confusing a lot of times, because people, I actually heard people say, well, you got a public defender, like, go get a real lawyer. That public defender is a lawyer, and they're probably way more qualified than the person you're paying.
And now this is in criminal, right? You're talking like in a criminal.
This is in criminal.
Okay, gotcha.
So you know what I mean? Because, like, that person you're paying in criminal, it may not be their primary area of practice. You know what I mean? Like, that public defender may know way more than that other attorney. But I digress. As a whole thing, it's a back and forth that I went through for years. I see these different things because I'm in and out of courtrooms, and listen to people make comments one way or the other. And it's always funny to me, because I always think to myself, you're so misguided. You think that money is the way out of everything, and you misguided in terms of that. You know what I mean?
No, and it's interesting that you say that, because to your point, from the outside looking in, the automatic assumption is, and this is obviously is a difference between criminal law and family law, but but then to me, someone who does not have a whole lot of experience dealing with anything legal in that regard, you also don't necessarily nuance the different segments of law, right? So it's just like, you just think a lawyer's a lawyer. Hey, you got a crime, or you got a business issue, or you got a tax issue, or you got a family issue or custody issue. I just need a lawyer. But there are nuances, and I kind of liken it to like specialties in medicine, right? I mean, you go to your cardiologist for heart issues, you go to neurologist for brain issues, your psychiatrist for mental issues, you go to your orthopedic for bone structural stuff. I mean, there are specialists there, just like there are specialists in the legal field. But a lot of times we don't necessarily take a step back and think that, and we just generalize, like you mentioned. I mean, and that was good that you kind of brought out the whole concept of, court appointed in a criminal sense might not be as bad of an option as you think. But as it pertains to the other realms, like with family law or, maybe civil cases, what the money does do is it affords more resources to add to your investigation or to your case. And so that's the part. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that is extremely interesting in a sense that I think that's something that we don't think about. We automatically just think of Johnny Cochran. If the glove doesn't fit, it must have quit. I mean, we just automatically, we think about the court, the law shows where they're in the court, arguing and being slick and doing this, but it's so much behind the scenes that helps to lead to favorable outcomes for your particular client.
And I'll say this as well. I think just with anything else that you would ever do in your life, you need to do your due diligence on the front end and kind of research and kind of really assess who you're going to hire. Especially, for instance, we're talking about family law. If it were me, if I know that I have a friend of mine and he's an attorney, and I ask him, what do you do? For the most part, he does tax law. Okay, That's great. You do taxes, you do bankruptcy and stuff. But would I necessarily approach him and ask him very intricate divorce law questions? Would I ask him about those custody cases? Not to say that he or she may not know, because he may. The lawyers are trained in more so general terms. So there's no lawyer who knows everything, and most lawyers specialize in things. So would I go to a bankruptcy attorney and expect them to be super well versed in all the intricate parts of custody law? No. So you kind of need to vet the people that you're going to hire, because at the end of the day, it's only going to affect your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm going to go home. I'm going to go to sleep. But these things are going to carry on for the duration of your life, or at least, your child's life or something like that. So it's always important that you vet the professionals that you bring into your life.
Now it's interesting you say that. So vetting the professionals that you bring into your life, right? Like, is there like a strategy I know everything is case by case, but do you have any kind of top line strategies that, that brothers should think about in regards to maybe vetting some, legal counsel in any regard, anything in regards to like family law? Like, do you have any tips that you would share?
Yeah. And see, Mike, those things, like you said, are case by case. And, the thing about it, I would say you have to do your best to vet as much as possible. But there are times where you need to take things with a grain of salt. Like, for instance, if it were me and I was looking for an attorney, I would definitely, because I'm a millennial, and I will admit, technology is a big part of my life and what I do. So my first process of vetting an attorney, I would definitely look at their website. I would maybe look at their reviews and do certain things like that before I, get the chance to meet them. And secondly, I would always turn to word of mouth. Referrals are a big, big part of business, for any business, especially in a legal business, because you'll find that a lot of times I walk into the courthouse and I'll see a gentleman, he's like 60 years old. And I'm like, how are you hanging on like this? And the only thing that you were able to offer people when you meet them is your car. You don't have a website. You don't have, too much of a background as far as back at the office. Like, you don't have too many assistants. Like, how are you able to do this? And a lot of times they tell me simply, if I represent him and I win, he's going to tell somebody else, and they're going to call me, and he's going to tell somebody else. So I would always use every avenue available to vet that person. But like I said, you have to take things with a grain of salt. There's no perfect way. There's no perfect person. So just do your best and do what you feel comfortable with.
That's
and
big.
You also have to do some type of like self-reflection as well, because a lot of times, I have a certain personality, and I expect certain things out of my clients, especially when I have male clients. And I tell them the first time that I agree to represent them, I tell them the very first thing: if you can't commit to being on time, I don't want to work with you. You know what I mean? Something very simple. So you have to vet that other person's personality to see if there's somebody that you're compatible with. And especially in family law cases, because these things take a long time. They're not going to be quick fixes. So it's almost like you having another working relationship with the individual.
So I mean, so in essence, I mean, vetting is obviously number one. And, is it, because sometimes we also feel like, we have to settle for, the first person that we meet or whatever. What about interviewing and going through various people and just kind of doing a comparison and contrast? Is that something that's highly recommended for people who are going through the process of needing to get legal attention or needing legal services?
Well, that's a tricky question, man. It's a tricky question because at the end of the day, for instance, like I don't work for myself right now, but in the next few months I plan to do so, and on some level, it's still a business.
Mm-hmm.
So, do I want to tell people, hey, yeah, go out, meet 2-3 people, and it's not like shopping for clothes where you can
Gotcha.
compare prices, even though you're well within your right to do that. It's just that a lot of times your goal is to vet that person, whereas their goal is to sell themselves on their ability to help you out in your case. So you got to almost play that tug, with that other person. Like, okay, they're trying to sell me their services. You're trying to see if I'm comfortable with them. So that's why I say, if you're well within your rights to shop around,
mm-hmm.
but I don't want people to feel as though that's always the best thing, because what's the most important, at least in my opinion, is that you feel comfortable. You feel comfortable working with that lawyer. You feel comfortable in their ability to get the job done and give you, or not give you, but work towards a favorable outcome. Because you may meet that person on your first go. Like I said, a lot of times business comes from word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So if Mike referred me over to John Smith, the attorney, and I get there and I'm like, hey, he's cool and he did this for Mike and Mike vouches for him, why would I go anywhere else? You know what I mean? So you're within your rights to do it. I just don't want you to overlook someone who may do that on the first try, who may put their best foot forward on that first meeting.
So basically, I got what you're saying. And the thing is, if it's kind of like, I guess, back before I was married and you're dating and all of that stuff, it's like, don't feel like I got to keep playing the field looking for something else. If I've met the right one, I'd have met the right one. Let's roll.
Exactly. Don't miss out on your soulmate trying to test the waters everywhere else.
And so speaking of family law, what pretty much is encompassed by family law? Like, what are the various segments that you handle or that you cover, in your particular practice now?
Well, the three big things that are encompassed under the family law umbrella would be divorces, custody, child support. Those are your big three. There are different smaller aspects that come from those three. For instance, divorce, you would have to have some understanding of business law and how things work. For instance, if you and your wife or you and your husband, whatever it may be, if you own property, there's going to be a way that you need to get appraisals. There's going to be whatever your particular state does in terms of distribution. I know most states do equitable distribution. So you're going to need some type of understanding of the valuation of the things that you own, as well as all your liabilities, because a lot of times people don't have a full understanding or kind of like a inventory of all their debts. Mm-hmm. So those things all go under that umbrella as well. In terms of like custody and you're dealing with kids, you also have to understand not only just the general custody law, but like things like education law, certain aspects of medical and things like that. As far as child support goes, if you have some type of background in accounting, that helps, because you're dealing with a lot of financials and you're dealing with the negotiations of that in some states. And in some states, there is no negotiation. But for the most part, divorce, custody, child support. And that's pretty much the three areas that I cover as well.
Interesting. And and the thing is, this is Black Fathers Now, and ultimately the whole goal is bringing the village to the brothers, and we hope to help to inspire and spawn really strong, intact families in which, kids are raised with both mom and dad and a loving household and, all of that. But we look at statistics and we look at numbers, and the reality is, that's not always the case. And so, unfortunately, there are people who are faced with, challenging circumstances from a relationship perspective. And if you're not facing it, almost everyone can state or validate the fact that they know someone close to them that is being impacted, in that particular realm, a split or some type of issue in regards to custody or visitation or child support. One of the things that I mentioned in your intro is the fact that, you're really passionate about kind of evening or leveling the playing field as it pertains to, to men in this particular, in the facet of family law. Like, what led to this passion, one, but then what are some areas in which, I guess you're working to kind of help, brothers kind of level the playing field in this particular realm of your legal practice?
That's a great question. So when I was in undergrad, I was at Michigan State University. I was taking summer classes just to kind of speed along the process of graduating and everything like that. Make sure I do it in 4 years, like my mom wanted me to, and all that stuff. So I took a job as a janitor, just on a whim. It was something to do, something to keep me busy when I wasn't in summer classes. And I met this guy, older guy, and he was somewhat of like a supervisor to us. And I was talking to him, and he was telling me a story about how he had 4 kids. He had 2 in a prior marriage and 2 living with him currently. And, we were talking to him like, let's just say his name was Joe. So, Joe, like, you're working, you're breaking your back to do this, and we know that you have a 9 to 5. Like, why are you doing this? Because as 18, 19-year-old kids, we're looking at a person who's in his 40s, like, you got 3 jobs, like, that's ridiculousness. But he tells us, like, listen, I got 4 kids. 2 of my kids don't live with me, and I'm working a second job to pay their child support. Their mother has turned them against me. I rarely get to see them. A lot of that comes from her attitudes, but a lot of it comes from me always working so that I can just afford the child support to give to them while not depriving the 2 children that I do have at home. So just seeing like him being in a state of despair and being in that mental state, not to say he was depressed or anything, but just in that level of despair, that kind of intrigued me, and a lot of what he had to say, it had to do with men versus women type of thing in a courtroom. And I get that. And as I go along in life and I go along in my current profession, a lot of times what I see is that men, they become down and out before they even walk into this process. So a lot of times what I like to do when I initially meet you is I won't listen to any complaints as it concerns gender. Because if I listen to those complaints, now I'm empowering you to believe in those things as if they are true.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times I tell people in an honest conversation, there's a human element to this. You know what I mean? So the judges are human. They have their own personal biases. You're going to have your own thoughts, and the child's mother or other parent will say has their own thoughts about what's best for the children. And that could be just based on gender. But I don't want you to come to me believing that because you're a man that you can't have everything that you expect to have, or you can't have everything that the mom has just because you're a man. I don't listen to those things because I don't want you to even believe in those things or have those things at the forefront of your mind.
Now, is that like, because I think that's powerful, man. I mean, really, you're helping to mentally empower the brother to go in or approach this process, not from the standpoint of, you know what, I'm already going to lose. I'm already on the bottom. It's like, no. You need to approach it as if you're going to win. It's kind of like with sports, right? I mean, sports is the best analogy. I mean, how many people ever won the game going into the game truly believing they had no chance to win the game? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's like very much few and far between. And so to your point, I can appreciate that. And I think that's something that, not necessarily just in family law, but just in general, as brothers, because of society or because of history or because, the way that, things tend to have been perpetuated in media, we automatically assume that we don't have a shot. And so I give you kudos for at least approaching your clients, the brothers that are about to embark on this really challenging circumstance. I mean, that we don't wish on anybody. I mean, we want you to have a job, but we don't necessarily want, brothers and sisters to have to go through this particular circumstance. But so kudos to you for helping to empower and build them up before this process starts.
I'm sorry to cut you off. You
No,
know why
you
it
good.
is? Mike? Because at the end of the day, there's nowhere in the law that takes account for gender. There's nowhere in the law that says the mom should have the child based on these particular things, just for the sole reason of them being the mom. You know what I mean? So it's not rooted in law. It shouldn't be rooted in your mind because, you know, we're living in 2019. For all the female listeners, I love you guys, and I respect all the things that you do. But at the same time, if we're going to be in a society now and we're going to live a progressive lifestyle, we're going to talk about feminism and we're going to talk about the root of feminism is equality. And so if it takes two to tango, we have equal rights going forward from the start. So I would never think that I'm coming into this, I'm losing because half of that child is mine. So I'm always thinking I'm on even playing field as soon as we start. Now, obviously, I look at the type of person I am, what my life is going through, what I'm able to provide going forward. And that's what I use to base where I'm going to go in this divorce or custody of child support case. It's not going to be I'm a man and well I think I should take a back seat to this just because I'm the man.
That's and that's powerful because you know, it's just, fellas, if you're listening and hopefully you're not necessarily having to deal with this, but if you are, take note of what my man is talking about. But if you have a friend or you know someone that's close to you that is having to deal with a circumstance, you know, in the realm of family law, they might not necessarily have someone in their corner like Darryl, who is in essence trying to empower them with the mindset that they should fight for their children. They should get what is rightfully theirs in regards to time, in regards to, you know, just equitable time with their children. So this is something I think for all of us that may serve in a support capacity to a friend or relative or someone close to you that's going through a circumstance like this, to pour into them and help to empower them and to strengthen them from a mindset perspective. Because at the end of the day, like Darryl just mentioned, you know, there's nothing from a legal perspective that denotes gender. So this is, a lot of this seems to come from, you know, I guess the societal biases that are out there in regards to who should nature and nurture and all of that. And it's funny, even that there's a book that I read. It's called The Boy Crisis by Dr. Warren Farrell. And one of the things that he talks about in there was from an outcomes perspective, when children are raised. Now, granted, the best case scenario is for kids to be raised with both mom and dad in a loving household, supportive. We all know that. That's what we want. Again, with Black Fathers Now, that's what we are pushing and hoping for. But they were saying, but in Dr. Warren Farrell's book, one of the things that he mentioned was if there was a scenario in which kids were raised by one parent or the other, the outcomes showed that kids fared better if they were raised by father as opposed to raised by mother. And that kind of blew my mind. It was interesting for the statistics to kind of shade in that favor. But and that's not to say, obviously, again, my default is I want families intact. I want kids raised by mama and daddy. I want them to have a loving, supportive household because we both bring value to the table in regards to our children. But don't discount dad in the process.
Exactly. You know, and I think that couldn't be said in a more thoughtful way. Like I said before, there's nothing about gender rooted in family law, nothing at all. So you should never walk into a situation believing that, oh, well, I'm just going to be a weekend dad now. Why? Because if you don't want to be, you don't have to be.
Wow.
You know what I mean? You can fight it out to the dirty end. And if at the end of the day, you end up being every other weekend dad, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm just saying if that's an outcome that you didn't initially desire, then at least you have some sense of worthiness and understanding that I fought for this and it didn't go my way. But to not do it in the first place seems kind of counterintuitive, because why would I go into something expecting not to get what I want when I understand that I start on equal ground? That's just my particular thought about it. But I do want to make this a point too. I don't want a lot of men to just go about it in very unrealistic ways. You know, my first step, and I don't know if we're going to get into this at all, Mike, but I'll just start it here. As soon as I meet a client and after I do my best to empower you and get you to come to the level of fortitude of where I am with it and how we're going to go forward and fight for this, I also ask that you do a very good job of self-reflection.
That's big.
Because there's no sense in you coming to me telling me all these things that you want and these things that you want to do and the things that you could do and the things that she's not doing if you don't have any basis for believing or actually achieving those things.
Wow.
And when I say this, a lot of times, and I'll just kind of get into this, when I meet clients, I have a mantra, and I'll probably trademark it one day. I don't know. But I have a mantra when I meet clients, especially if it's a custody or case or divorce case that involves custody matters. I always ask clients, are you ready to go to war? And not war in a literal sense of fighting back and forth with your child's mother or the other parent. It's, and that's an acronym. And I always tell people the W is willing. Are you willing to take on these new responsibilities? Because there are going to be those are your kids and they've been your kids for years, but the responsibility is new now because you're going to be essentially a single parent. The A, are you able? Have you positioned yourself to be able to take on the responsibility? Like, it's one thing for you to be willing, and yes, I want to do it, but are you actually able to do it realistically? And the R just stands for, are you ready? You may say, yeah, I want to. Yeah, I got everything set up, but if you're not done running the streets, you're not ready. You're not ready to take on these new things. So I always ask clients, are you actually ready to go to war? Because I'm going to go to war for you, and I need you to be ready to do the same. So a lot of that comes back to just being, having a genuine self-reflection of who you are, the needs of your children, because at the end of the day, it's always going to be about your children, especially if it's a custody matter involving, one or more than one child, and, where the trajectory of your life is going. So I always stress that to people, and I'll give you a prime example. A lot of times, men, you'll go into a situation, you're coming off a separation from your wife, and you're saying, well, I want the kids every other week. And yeah, that sounds good on paper. I actually encourage that. If that's what you want, I'll empower you to get that. But at the same time, you got to realize that if you've left the marital home and now you're living in a one-bedroom apartment, that's good for you. That may not be good for your child, because now your child, either one of you are going to have to sleep on the couch. You know what I mean? So that's something that kind of drops you down a little bit. Not to say that you should change your life for the sole purpose of having your children with you all the time. We all have to do what we have to do.
Absolutely.
But that's one of those things where I say, are you actually able to? If you left the marriage and you're pulling 80-hour weeks, as some of my colleagues do who work in the huge law firms, you pull 80 hours a week. Are you actually able to take care of your child every other week? Are you able to pick them up from school? Are you able to take them to practice? You have to be realistic with yourself as well. I want you to get the things that you want out of the situation, but you have to be realistic.
To thine own self be true.
Exactly.
Like, and I'm gonna tell you, man, that powerful acronym of WAR. I mean, are you willing? Are you able? And are you ready? And I think that's something, even because I think about concepts that can be applicable to life outside of any particular genre. Because to me, really dope concepts or really dope principles are applicable really not restrictive to the particular circumstance, right? So the whole concept of war, are you willing? Are you able? And are you ready? I mean, when you approach anything, fellas, I hope you're taking Darryl's advice, man. Attorney Darryl Daniels. I hope you
make my mother proud.
That's it. I got to give you the full title, man. Esquire. Isn't it Esquire too?
Esquire.
There it is. See, we're gonna throw it there. We're gonna give it to you. But real talk, man, fellas, are you ready for war? Are you willing? Are you able? And are you ready? But the thing is, it's not about talking a good game. It's actually about doing that self-reflection and really doing a deep dive, quantifying and qualifying, is that the truth? Because the issue is a lot of times we talk a good game. Like, I mean, I'm a talker. I'm a salesperson. I'm a speaker. I'm a podcaster. I interview people all the time. I'm a talker. I can talk a good game, but I have to consistently challenge myself. Do I believe everything that I'm saying? Right. And I think that's something that you brought to the table that brothers need to really be mindful of. So before you approach any circumstance, whether it be something in the realm of family law or business or life, or you're starting a business, whatever you're doing, ask yourself, are you ready for war? Are you willing? Are you able? And truthfully, are you ready? Quantify and qualify that from an honest perspective. It's not what you perspective. It's not what you say. It's what you're doing. I dig that, brother.
Thank you. And it is transferable in the way that you put it. And I hadn't even thought about it that way, but yes, it's very transferable to different areas of your life, as well as different professions. So I think it's the most important thing, because what will happen is you'll come in, you'll tell me everything you want. I'll empower you to get those things you want. But then as we start to break down your life, we start to realize that you aren't really willing to do this. You know what I mean? Like you've lived a life where your son has been playing football for the last 3 or 4 years, but now you're telling me that you just don't feel like taking him to practice. And that's another thing that I want to point out. It's very important that you understand the goal and the purpose of and I'm just going to say, because we're talking to Black fathers, but the purpose of a custody portion of the trial, or not the trial, but the case in general. We're looking forward. We cannot, a good amount of the time will be spent looking forward and not backwards. That's why it's so important to self-reflect on what the trajectory of your life will be going forward. Because a lot of times I find that men will come to me and they'll tell me, I've always done this. I've always given her this so that my child may have. And I've always done this and that and these things. And yeah, that's great. But at the same time, those things aren't necessarily transferable to court, because now we're looking forward. We're not looking at what you've always done, because now we're looking at a situation in which you and her are no longer together. And you and her have to live separate lives. So what does that look like going forward, and how does that impact the best interest of your child or children? You know what I mean? So that's a major thing. And I do have some things that, I think may better position people in terms of, if you're feeling like your relationship is headed down that road, or if you're already in that particular phase in life, the things that you can kind of do on the front end to kind of better position yourself. Number one, obviously, is kind of evaluate your living situation. If and I do want to preface this with another statement. I don't want people thinking that you need to go broke, or you need to change your entire life to accommodate what the courts may order you to do. I don't want you to do that. I just kind of want you to evaluate it and be realistic with yourself. So, for instance, you're going through a separation. If your living situation is such that you moved in with your homeboy and now you're on his couch, you can't honestly think that judge is going to give you kids 50% of the time, and the kids come over at your homeboy's house.
Absolutely.
With you. You know what I mean? That's a very extreme example, but you have to evaluate. Now, I will say, in a perfect world, you have a room for your children at your house. Obviously, if they're same-sex children, you have a way better chance of just having like one extra room. If you have a boy and a girl, maybe you try to get 2 extra rooms or whatever. But do your best to be realistic about your living situation. Also, your money situation. You know what I mean? Understand that when you go through this process, and especially if it's not an amicable situation, if you guys have not parted ways amicably, you going down a rabbit hole where the person with the most custody is probably going to pay the child support. So understand what your money looks like. And I'm not going to dive too deeply into that today, because that's a whole another conversation that you
absolutely
with the attorney that you actually hire. Also, if you're going to do something as far as the custody goes, you should build allies in your children's network. So don't think that you're going to be able to make these important decisions about your children's lives and you haven't been to not one parent-teacher conference. You haven't took the child to the doctor not one time. You know, build those allies. Even if you start today. Now, I won't say that's always the best option, but even if you start today, build those allies in your children's lives. Because I'm going to tell you right now, it's the worst thing possible for you to go to court and the child's mother has subpoenaed the teacher to kind of testify on her behalf and all the things that she's done to kind of help your child's education, and for that teacher to say, well, I've never met this man before in my life.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So those things don't kind of weigh in your favor at all. Also, very important, these next two things, you know, as you start to feel your relationship dissolve and you feel like you're headed for divorce or custody battle, keep receipts. Keep receipts. They're very important. Obviously, that's part of those things where I say, you know, that's somewhat of looking back, but they do come in play because, you know, you don't want to walk up into a situation where it's just a he said, she said, he said, she said the whole time you're in court. You know, for instance, I have clients all the time, well, he doesn't do anything for my child. He hasn't bought anything. You break out those receipts. I don't know what you mean. That child only has a bed because I bought that child a bed. You know, that child is able to go on those field trips because I paid for those field trips. And lastly, I'll say this. I think it's very important that you start communicating with your significant other or ex-significant other through written form, whether text message or emails, anything that you feel is important.
Paper trail.
Exactly. And even if you have a phone conversation, you should treat it like a business deal. You know, if I have a phone conversation with someone, I'll send them a confirmation email. We'll get off the phone and I'll say, as just discussed a few minutes ago via our telephone conversation, X, Y, and Z. So, you know, these are the things that go a long way. And I promise you, they go a long way in helping your attorney kind of decipher where you are in this case and what this battle is kind of going to look like.
You know, fellas, I hope you paid attention to that. I have an addition to that after this, but you know, what Darryl mentioned about evaluating your circumstances and evaluating your finances, being really honest about that, you know, keeping receipts, building allies with your children's network. I mean, that to me is worth its weight in gold. And that's probably worth this whole conversation right there in regards to that, because a lot of people don't think about that. And then for communication, you know, in that particular setting, make sure that communication is either done written or at least there's confirmation of all communication so that you, in essence, have a paper trail. But I'm going to tell you something. As he was talking, man, I was sitting here thinking to myself, I was just like, damn, I'm going to do everything possible to keep my family intact because I'm serious. I'm serious, man. Like I was sitting here just thinking about it. I was just like, you know, I've heard numerous times how, you know, in essence, when you go through a divorce, it in essence turns your marriage into a business transaction. And hearing you talk about it really re-solidified that, because this is what you do day in and day out, hundreds of times a year with, you know, families who 2 years ago, everything was hunky dory. And now it's, you know, they're seeing you. I mean, this is challenging, but again, it's a reality. And, you know, I like to, you know, with the platform, always lift and empower and strengthen folks. And I think we're doing so in regards to information here. Again, this is a subject that I pray, I mean, literally day in and day out, that nobody ever has to face. Like, we want Darryl to actually have to go back and become a sports agent, you know, because nobody's you know what? Like, that's my thing. Look, that's what we're going to pray for. We like, you know what? We want this brother 2 years from now to have to open a sports agency because ain't nobody getting divorced no more. Right. Like, that's the ultimate goal. Like, I'm claiming that. So look here. So if he looked like he was given the prophecy on the Michigan State winning the national championship, 2 years from now, he's going to be a sports agent because we're going to put him out of business because Black Fathers Now is going to help to save marriages. Right. But in the unfortunate case that, you know, this is a road that you're going down, I hope y'all take heed to his advice. You know, think about the concept. Are you ready for war? Are you willing? Are you able? And are you ready? But then on the flip side of that, man, have you taken an inventory, you know, of yourself and really looked at yourself and your circumstance and your finances? You know, have you built allies with your children's networks? Are you keeping receipts? But then on the flip side, are you making sure that communication, you know, with your particular partner is clear, documented, and in essence, there's a paper trail there? Like, these are all things to think about should the unfortunate circumstance come up in your life, one. But then on the flip side, again, like I mentioned before, if it's not necessarily you, and I hope it's not, but if it's a friend of yours, a neighbor, a relative that's going through this, these are things that you can potentially help them to get empowered by, so that even though this situation is unfortunate, they can at least set themselves up for the best possible outcome for all involved.
You know, one thing, Mike, that you said that I thought that was interesting, and I want to harp on a little bit because it never fails. But it's true. When you're going through a divorce, it becomes now a business situation. And I tell clients all the time, you know, and this is after they've gotten to know me and we've built a rapport. And I tell them, like, don't you realize that when you first talk to me, I let you spill unto me everything that you had to say. But as soon as we end that first conversation, I told you, we're done arguing. We're done bad mouthing her, and we're done going back and forth, because now we're focused on results.
Mm-hmm.
We're focused on getting the best result for you. So a lot of times people come and, you know, she's this, she's that, she doesn't do this, she doesn't do that, she's mean, she's cheated, she did these things. I'll let you pour all that out. I'll let you put that all on the table. But at the end of the day, these are the things that really matter. Why? Because your relationship has dissolved before you stepped into my office today. So these things are over now. We now have to look towards the future and find out what's the best result for your money and your children. And you as well, just as a person. You know what I mean? So a lot of times people, they'll come to court and they want to argue back and forth for, she said this lie and he said that about me, and these things. Like, it's not time for that anymore. You had those opportunities to hash out any problems you may have had before you got into my office, before we got into court. Because I'll tell you now, Darryl Daniels, I won't sit here and badmouth your ex-wife to the judge for the sake of badmouthing her, because that serves no purpose. And that does nothing but get the judge mad at you, get the judge mad at me. Now, at the same time, I'm not going to allow someone to bully you as my client. I mean, you're paying me to have you be bullied or not be a victim of sorts. But understand that there is a time and a place for you to do all the arguing. There's a time and a place for you to deal with the grief. And unfortunately, it's not in my office. It's not in court.
That is powerful. And fellas, I want you to realize that there's a time and a place to argue. There's a time and a place to get it all off your chest and go back and forth. But by the time you sit down in the office with Darryl Daniels, Esquire, right, that time is past. So, and I guess for me, it's kind of this semblance of hope, you know, thinking about this, you know, understanding all this entailed on the back end. Brothers, if you do see yourself going down this particular road, or if there are some hiccups in the road, because all of us that are married, I mean, we can tell you day in and day out is not always perfect. You know, we love our spouse to death and all of that, but at the end of the day, there's still people. I'm very far from perfect, you know, and my wife is very far from perfect. But what ends up happening is you still work through your challenges and you build going forward in spite of, because at the end of the day, we have to figure that out. But one of the things that Darryl made, and I want you to really pay attention to it, by the time you get to him, that part is over. So from the standpoint of hope, fellas, if there are some hiccups, don't let this thing fester and build. Don't wait until the straw that breaks the camel's back, because the thing is, once you sit down with Darryl, it's a done deal. We're basically at the point of figuring how to get this thing dissolved in the best possible way. But let's try to keep from getting there. So once you start noticing things aren't right, let's work on counseling. Work on,
Exactly.
communication. Let's, sometimes it's environment. Who are y'all hanging out with? You need to find other couples who want to stay married, who are doing the right things that you need to, feed off of. Who are you having conversations with? Who is in your ear? Fellas, dig your well before you're thirsty. Let's do these things because truthfully, after talking to Darryl, I mean, he's a cool brother and all, but I'm borderline scared. You know, I I don't want to fool with him, right? I mean, just being complete. Me and him can chop it up offline, but I'm saying in this particular realm, I don't want to go there. And fellas, I don't want y'all to go there either. Again, 2 years from now, we're claiming he's gonna have a successful sports agency, right? Because none of us are gonna need his services, And so, I mean, look, I'm keep saying that, man. This is what we're working towards. But but
stress for me.
Huh?
It'd be less stress for me in the sports agency world.
See, there you go. See, look at this, man. See, everything happens for a reason, right? But but we're real talk, fellas, man. I mean, again, if you're down this path or you know someone down this path, empower them to, with some of the tips listed by Darryl so that they can have the best possible outcome. But I'm encouraging y'all to not get to this point. Let's do what we have to do to keep our families intact, to raise our kids, in the best possible situation with the highest probability for success, having love from both parents and this network or this village. And let's build strong communities, man. Let's make excellence in Black fatherhood the new standard, but let's do that from within the scope of the family, man. Let's work on this thing.
And it's two other points that I want to make really quickly.
Go ahead, brother.
And they do kind of build on that hope a little bit that, maybe you'll have, because this process, it can be a grueling process. It can be very emotionally taxing, physically taxing, financially taxing. But two things that I want to implore on people out there that are listening. Number one, if you're not quite sure that, this relationship is over and done with, and you just kind of want to test what the waters may be in terms of what your life may or may not look for after dissolution, after divorce, I would check with your local state's laws and see if they offer legal separations. I know in DC, you can get a legal separation. Now, what I like to tell people, the short version of legal separation, it's just practice divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So you can file for legal separation and you'll see what your life is like, because it draws that line in the sand, because now we have a line of what's marital debt. We have a line of what's marital property. And now we're living a divorced life, but technically we haven't been separated from the state yet. So we don't have a divorce, but we're separated in room and board, basically. So if you're not quite sure, and maybe you want to propose this to your significant other, if you're going through a rough patch, and obviously I can't speak too much to married life because I haven't been married before, but if you're going through that particular phase, legal separation may be an option. And I give people that option a lot, because if you come to me and I get the sense that you're not, what I say, done,
mm-hmm.
You're not done, then maybe you want to explore that option of legal separation. Also, another thing is that, let's say you are done, and that's fine. Don't underestimate the power of just overall agreement with your significant other. It does not always have to be arguments and a war, and understand that if you and her can come to some agreement amicably and have some give and take, and you guys are in a space where we're not mad, we just understand that this may not be the best option for us going forward, don't underestimate the power in you two agreeing outside of court. Because I'll be honest, with the first thing you go to court, and you got to understand that you're in front of a judge who, they don't know you. Your attorneys, they will never truly know you and what all you and your wife have been through. So the courts, they do everything to empower you and your significant other to figure things out on your own before you allow some third party who wouldn't know you from a can of paint if they saw you on the street figure those things. So don't underestimate it, because that's another thing too. You walk into these situations and you can't agree on something very small, and now you're asking some old, and I keep saying old, but I don't mean it. I'm just being some foreign person decide what's best for your children. So please don't underestimate the power in just you and your significant other agreeing on things before you even get to court. And the last thing I'll say is this: if for nothing else, it'll save you a lot of time and a lot of money, because in this business, time is definitely money.
In this business, time is money. You said that more than once. So therefore, fellas, take heed to what he said. So fellas, I mean, so Darryl, man, again, I appreciate your wisdom, man. Like I said, I don't want brothers to have to come see you in this regard, but it would be nice for them to come see you. Are you on social media?
I am on social media. My Facebook is set up for professional realm. So my Facebook is just my first and last name.
Okay.
Darryl Daniels. I'm Darryl, Darryl. Last name Daniels, regular spelling.
Okay. Gotcha. So and as far as like, if you have, and so again, I don't want brothers to have to come see you legally, but it'd be cool to check you out on Facebook and connect with you and, just kind of chop it up and give you some kudos in regards to the wisdom that you drop. But then you practice in DC. So are you currently licensed in DC? Is that where you are?
Yes, I'm licensed in Pennsylvania and DC.
Okay, gotcha. So, fellas, if you are in Pennsylvania and or DC and you are in the realm of needing family law help, definitely reach out to Darryl Daniels. Is there any way for the brothers that are listening in DC or Pennsylvania, if they're in need of services, for them to get in touch with you? Is it the Facebook page or any other way?
You can reach out to my Facebook page. I also give you my email. Right now, I'm currently working for a small organization.
Okay.
And if I feel that it's a fit with our organization, I'll definitely refer you to my job. I'm working on establishing my own book of business at the moment. So within the next few months, I fully intend on having my own firm, setting that up for all the gentlemen who find themselves in this unfortunate situation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to reach out to me, my email is Darryl Daniels, one word, the number 11,
okay,
@gmail.com.
Darryl Daniels 11 @gmail. Okay. And so I'll have that in the show notes. So Darryl Daniels, your Facebook page, as well as your email address. So fellas, reach out to my man, let him know you heard about him on Black Fathers Now. Let him know the wisdom that he dropped was extremely valuable, but then, just check up with him. I mean, he's a knowledgeable brother. I would definitely reach out. I got a question. Darryl Daniels 11. Why 11? What's significant about 11?
Michigan State 2011.
Huh?
I graduated Michigan State 2011.
Okay. I just had to ask because, I'm a part of an illustrious fraternity that was founded in 1911. And I was just like, oh, I see 11 there. I didn't know. Just checking. So it's all good, my brother. Well, my man, I thank you so much for spending some time, chopping it up with us, man, and really enlightening the brothers in regards to the realm of family law, because this is something that, a lot of us need to really get hip to. So I really appreciate you. I appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate your work. And brother, keep up the good fight, man. Keep up the good fight.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for having me. Everybody out there listening, thank you for having me and just spending this time with Mike and myself. And I hope, while it doesn't come to this ever for you guys, if it does, I hope that you make the best decisions possible for yourself and your children.
That's what's up. At the end of the day, make the best decisions possible for you and your children. 100. Now, fellas, as always, make sure to visit blackfathersnow.com. Subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Amazon Alexa, Spotify. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, subscribe, share, and definitely make sure to reach out to my man Darryl Daniels, Esquire. Yeah. Got to make your mama proud, Esquire. And make sure to reach out to him. I have his contact information for his Facebook page in the show notes, as well as his email address, DarrylDaniels11 @gmail.com. Y'all reach out to him. Let him know you heard about him on BlackFathersNow.com. This episode is sponsored by Black Family Apparel. Visit BlackFamilyApparel.com and grab some dope apparel that celebrates the nuances of the Black family. And fellas, until next time, y'all be blessed, well, and wise. And I'll holler at you. Peace.